Hey YouTubers, it's Charlie. Happy Thanksgiving. Kevin Feige was recently talking about the state of comic book filmmaking, Marvel versus DC, so I wanted to make a video about that. But they actually, Marvel and DC characters, literally fought each other in the Amalgam universe, so I'll explain that too. So here we go.
This doesn't have to end in a fight, Tony.
You just started a war.
It's time you learn what it means to be a man.
Stay down! If I wanted it, you'd be dead already.
She with you?
I thought she was with you. I could do this all day.
On the roost!
Hey everyone.
So let's start with the fun stuff first. Open pitch battle between Marvel and DC characters in the Amalgam universe. If you've never heard of it, it was a limited series in the mid-90s where DC and Marvel wrote a story that was out of the main continuity, where the characters from the different companies learned of each other's existence and then fought this battle. The loser's universe would die off. So if the Marvel characters won, Mortal Kombat style, DC's universe would be killed off. But it was out of continuity, so it was just a fun way to say this isn't really happening. In spoiler warning for the end of that story, I'll just wait a second, or if you guys want to skip forward in the video 30 seconds. So what ends up happening is it becomes this situation whereby they combine the two universes despite Marvel characters having won the battle. But there's a big twist whereby they allow the two universes to be fused. It becomes the Amalgam universe with, both Marvel and DC characters in it. But the actual battles that they fought were Aquaman versus Namor, Elektra versus Catwoman, Flash versus Quicksilver, Robin versus Jubilee, Silver Surfer versus Green Lantern, Thor versus Captain Marvel, Superman versus the Hulk, Spider-Man versus Superboy, Batman versus Captain America, Wolverine versus Lobo, and Storm versus Wonder Woman. So when you see Superman holding Thor's hammer and Captain America's shield going on and on about how amazing it feels, that's from the Amalgam comics. But as for whether they would ever do that in the movies, I don't think there's ever a chance for that. Maybe they might make an animated movie, but that seems like a long shot. There's always lots of jokes and references that Marvel makes to DC characters in its titles. DC does the same thing with Marvel characters. I think it's just going to stay at that level for the time being. But I totally think it's possible that they could revisit this idea in some alternate form of media, even if they can't do it in the live action films. But the ongoing debate, Marvel versus DC, has largely just been a comic book thing, thanks to the efforts of Stan Lee and the people at DC in the past 40 to 50 years. So as was the case then, typically the people at the top, like Stan Lee, like Kevin Feige nowadays, which is, mostly my reason for making this video, were really cool with the competition, despite it being very friendly. It's like a football match. You want your team to win, but that doesn't mean that you hate the other team. So maybe this is a surprise to you, maybe it's not a surprise, but Kevin Feige said that he's a fan of all superhero films, all studios who are adapting from what he says the comic book medium. So that includes Fox, that includes the Sony people, but obviously they've already made the arrangement for Spider-Man. But Kevin Feige just seems like a really cool dude who really loves comic books and really loves to make movies. So there isn't an ounce of hate inside his heart for any of his supposed competitors. So really each comic book studio has its own criticisms. Marvel and DC are just the two big ones just because of the IP that they control. Fox X-Men universe is still really big too, but comparatively, there's fewer movies that they could make. But even though they share some of the same issues as DC's films, the criticisms are actually very, very different. When you look back at the old Marvel films, a lot of them almost look like TV shows just because of the way they filmed them. They've largely tried to change that, but they've had Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3. They've had a lot of movies to kind of tweak the way they make their films look. So because DC chose to start its film universe, the DCEU, with Zack Snyder, and probably his biggest skill is his visual style. The DC movies that we've seen so far look amazing, But the problem is there's like a billion different things that make a really good film. So even if it looks amazing, that doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be an amazing experience. And really, I think that's the most important thing, is like what you feel like when the movie's over. And I think in each case, like Marvel, even like the X-Men films and DC films are all really fun to watch. But the problem is that there are certain films in each of their libraries that just like aren't really fun to re-watch again and again. So really the mark of a really good comic book film is something that you can rewatch like a billion times. Like when I was a little kid, I was able to rewatch the Star Wars films over and over because they were pretty good films with a pretty good story, and they visually looked really interesting, at least for the time. I mean, obviously film has evolved a lot since the original Star Wars movies have been made. 2016 in particular has been a really hard year for comic book films just because of what's going on in the world, what's happening in the United States. So, people just get angrier and angrier. So you look to films like these to make you feel better about existence and life. So when you see a film with a really dark tone, that doesn't necessarily help. So I think the greatest crimes against comic book films this year were mostly crimes of tone, not so much of story, because there are always story problems in comic book films. Captain America Civil War, very fun film to watch with a very hopeful twist at the end, but it also has all kinds of story problems along the way. So you look at a film like Deadpool that kind of turns that on its head, which is why I think it did so well, because it had just the right tone for the right story, for the right character at the right time. And I think the answer to that, like the tone problem of this year, and where Deadpool got it right in 2016, Spider-Man Homecoming will get it right in 2017, along with Justice League. We can talk about what happened to Superman at the end of Batman v Superman, and I think most of us have a pretty good idea of what's going to happen with his arc during Justice League. But maybe some people haven't read the comics, they don't know the Death of Superman arc. Let's just say there's going to be some really exciting stuff happening in Justice League. And don't forget, there is a Star Wars movie happening at the end of the year. There's like a very small Star Wars Episode 8 movie, very quiet indie production. So a lot of the pessimism that you see in the fandom now will largely be gone by the time that gets here, just because of the things that are coming in 2017. And the fact that the studios have seen like the way people have reacted to all the movies that have come out this year and said, okay, we're going to listen, we understand, you really like these characters, but you're not super happy with the way they treated them in these movies. So Marvel vs. DC at the box office. Marvel crushed it this year. DC crushed it this year too, despite what people thought about each of their films. Like there were people that hated the Marvel films this year. There were people that hated the DC films this year, but they still made billions of dollars all around. That is because, one, they have really good marketing machines, so regardless of the quality of films, there'll always be people that will show up for Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, Robert Downey Jr., but the reason why you see all kinds of movies make crazy money, even if they're not the greatest films ever, is because people love those characters, so they'll show up for their movies. It's just that there'll be a lot of complaining after the fact, like, I can't believe that movie was so terrible, but they'll still go see the next movie with that character, even if the previous movie wasn't that great. So the studios pick up on that. They're like, okay, people love Batman, people love Captain America. We understand you're not super satisfied with the last movie we made. We'll do better next time. So they go back to the kitchen, they bring the meal out, they try to make it better. This actually played out pretty early on with Marvel's films. If you remember, The Incredible Hulk, not the greatest film ever, but I think it's been long enough that people largely give Marvel a pass just because there have been so many Marvel films since then. They've had enough time to hit their stride. They've found the right actors. Like they've started to land some really big A-list talent. Like Cate Blanchett is in a Thor movie. That just seems ridiculous and exciting, but ridiculous that she would sign on after seeing the first two Thor movies. But DC has only just started. Like it took them a long time to make Batman v Superman. So the problem with making films is that it'll take you a couple years. So you're making this huge bet. So you don't get feedback till the movie drops. They got their feedback. Now they can go back and make a better film, bring it back. It's just that Marvel has been through that grinder so many more times than DC has so far that DC will get there. Jeff Johns is the new Kevin Feige. There's a comic book guy up at the top that's not going to let them drag the characters through the mud. So it's just going to take a little while to make these movies. So, that's why I think a lot of people were disappointed this year because it's like, hey, we want a better movie. And they're like, okay, we'll make a better movie, but it just takes a couple years to get there. Mark my words, in like the next 5 years, what you're gonna see is you'll see like the slate of Jeff Johns pioneered DC films, and there'll be a much more equal consensus from Marvel quality and DC quality. So I think, the Marvel films that people will be really satisfied with in the next couple years will be Spider-Man Homecoming, Thor Ragnarok, Black Panther, and both Infinity War films. On the DC side, I think those films that people will be most happy about after leaving the movie theater will be Justice League, The Flash, Aquaman. You can't not like Jason Momoa. He is like one of the best actors that they've ever landed. And the Man of Steel sequel. The Superman films, more than anything, are DC's opportunity to make heartwarming films that are really exciting that you could rewatch a billion times. And you guys can let me know in the comments, like, which Marvel and which DC films do you think will be the most rewatched in the next 5 years? Will it be like the Flash film? Will it be the Justice League film? Infinity War? There are like certain films that are just so much more fun to watch from Marvel and DC. And I've already rewatched most of the Marvel films so many times that it started to be like a song that you can't get out of your head. So I tend to appreciate the smaller ones like Ant-Man, Doctor Strange, things that do really weird, different things, which is why I'm super excited about Thor Ragnarok. So it's a little bit easier to rewatch stuff that you haven't already seen a billion times, which is why Kevin Feige said that they're trying to do so many different things in Phase 3 and Phase 4 that they've never done before, which is the same from the other studios. So like Kevin Feige said, he's really excited about the films his competitors are making. He's really excited about DC films. I think it's the same thing from Jeff Johns and the DC people. Most of the comic book guys that you run into are actually really cool dudes. There are like a few Mr. Burns type people up at the top at all the studios, but largely like they're getting pushed out the door. So like Kevin Feige was able to take Marvel Studios off on their own, so they don't have to worry too much about that. The DC people made Jeff Johns one of the new gods of their film universe, so there's just so much exciting stuff happening that's gonna be dropping next year. Literally next year, like you're not gonna have to wait that long. And I know there's a lot of rumors about trailers for like Justice League, Spider-Man dropping in the next couple weeks, so be sure to subscribe to get everything. I will be doing a Spider-Man Homecoming Carnage video later tonight, so that'll post in a couple hours. But if there are any comic book bonus videos that you guys want me to do or movie bonus videos this weekend, just let me know in the comments. While you guys wait for that to post, you can click here to watch that funny Spider-Man Tom Holland video where he gets that special Batman surprise, and you can click here to watch like the latest Arrow Flash big Fortnite crossover trailer. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Let's high five. I'll see you guys tonight.